Hello and welcome to the July 25th tutorial for Howl. This is the reference photo we're going to use. This is a photo that my daughter took at the Cliffs of Moher in Ireland where the winds howl. So I thought this would be a great photo for this prompt and painting. I'm going to pop our camera up into the tripod so we can get started. I just want to make sure everybody had a chance to screenshot the photo. Okay, we are going to start with our drawing. This is going to be a really simple drawing because it's just some basic lines, and we're going to look at our paper in kind of a divided up space in order to figure out what's going where. And so I do this all the time where I take my paper and I kind of roughly mark the center points both horizontally and vertically. This is not perfect. I'm not measuring. I'm just giving myself landmarks so that when I make my sketch, I'm looking at my photograph and I'm seeing that, okay, at about a quarter of the way in and a little more than halfway up, this first big cliff starts. And this is a rough estimate, and it just kind of comes back like this, and there's just a teeny sliver of green on top. So that's done. And it kind of dips down a little here. And then we're going to come down and we've got like kind of a ledge, and then I'm going to look at like my next part before I bring this all the way down is that we've got this, like you're standing at the edge of the cliff. And so I'm going to look at where does it start, and it starts about a quarter of the way up the page. So I'm going to look at this point, this halfway mark, and I'm going to go halfway again so that it's about a quarter of the way up. And I can see it kind of bends like this. It's got a little tiny jut. Like a little, like it juts out just a little bit here, so I'm going to make just kind of a little zig to show that. And then when it gets to about this point, so not here, but maybe right about here, it starts to kind of dip in, and then it continues to kind of do that in a rough way. And down here, it's coming just past the halfway point. Not all the way to the 3/4 point, but maybe kind of in between that. So I'm just going to use these kind of as I'm looking at my reference photo, I'm using this as a guide. And it doesn't have to be perfect. We just have to give kind of a general idea. All right, so this kind of bends in. You can kind of see there's like a little ledge here. And that actually kind of carries through this way a bit. Right, and then we kind of come out this way again. All right, so that's that first kind of cliff, right? And then the next one starts, I actually think I might be a little low. That's okay, we're gonna leave it. All right, this could come up a little higher. Okay, but I think rather than redraw it, we're gonna leave it how it is. Okay, and then this cliff that's behind here, off in the distance, it starts about here. And it comes, like if this point is here, I'm looking at my reference photo, the bottom edge of this kind of juts back just a little bit. So it's not straight across, but it's just a little to the back on an angle. And then at the bottom, it has a little, like you can see these little tiny ledges, almost look like stair steps. And it comes up to just past, or just, yeah, kind of where, actually kind of the bottom of where this point is. And it comes down like that, right? And then we're just going to come, so this develops the basey rocky part, and then you see you have this like kind of lush green part that goes on top. It's kind of hilly, and it kind of dips down and then comes up. There. Again, this isn't perfect. We're just doing a rough, kind of a rough sketch. And we're getting a general idea of where everything's at. Okay, so now behind this little cliff is a bigger cliff, and the edge of it comes not quite to the 3/4 mark, which would be here, but a little bit back from that. So we're gonna just kind of pull here and mark a point. So like here's the halfway point between. No, so this would be like, if I'm looking at this as 0, this is my 3/4. And if I go up, it's not quite there. So I'm just pulling my pencil back to create a mark. and that is where I'm going to have the base of this. And again, it just kind of angles. It's not perfectly horizontal because it's angling this, it's angling back towards the ocean, right? And this one doesn't have this little stair-steppy thing. It just kind of goes straight up, but then it has a little like hook, and it comes up and then up and out and over. And then it kind of rises up and down. Okay, you can see where this is where I'm a little off. So what I'm gonna do is make a couple of adjustments. All right, so the two adjustments I'm gonna make is that this, I didn't start this off quite high enough. So I'm gonna start this off a little higher. And I think that that is gonna help everything kind of come back into play a little bit here. Okay, and then this was where it kind of kicks out and comes down. All right, so I'm gonna make that adjustment, and that means that this now is gonna come, because it kind of dips into here, right? I had it too high over there. All right, and then it comes like that. All right, there we go. Let me get rid of all of this because this is not there. All right, so I've lowered this a little bit. It just doesn't feel quite right though. Okay, I'm just gonna play with this a bit. You go ahead and play with yours. I wanna get this so that I'm happy with the proportions, and it just doesn't feel quite right. It actually feels like this should come in a little farther here. And so I'm gonna do that, even though that's not really how it is in our picture, but that's okay. All right, it just feels more right to me. And then maybe this is going to come up a little higher. Okay. There we go. That feels, okay, I think that feels better. So mess with your sketch until it feels right to you, and then I can make this a little higher too, because that felt a little low. These are kind of big cliffs, and then this was like, there we go. There's my kind of green area. Okay, I'm gonna leave that be. I'm not gonna mess with it anymore. Okay, and then we have this really cool off in the distance, and it sits a little behind here. We've got this kind of like, you can see there's a little bit of rock kind of sticking out. And then it's like a tower, right? But this kind of comes this way. There's like a little kind of like eyebrowy shape that is sort of the base of this. And then, and it's right here too. So like, you can see like that's what this is. This little shape here is that kind of like a little eyebrowy bit of rock that's sticking just barely out of the ocean before the tower juts up. And it comes up and it's got like a little like spiky deal. And then down kind of like at an angle, and it comes back down to the other side, and it gets a little wide and down. Okay, and then way off in the distance, I'm going to kind of fix this a little, because this kind of comes in at an angle like this. These are worn down by all that weather, and then it comes in like this and then like that. Okay. Okay, and now, like kind of where this is curving, you see, I think I have this curve too high, maybe. No, it's about the halfway mark. Actually, it's not. This is too high. I've got like this little jutty thing too high. Then it curved like that. Okay, there, I'm happy with that. And then kind of where this curves, you see it comes off like way in the distance is this other little cliff, and it's really kind of grayed out and it looks small. Of course it's not, it's giant just like the rest of these are, but because it's off in the distance it looks smaller than it is. Okay, if you're not comfortable making this sketch, I do not consider it cheating to go ahead and print this off on your printer so that you can then use it as a tracing. This is one of those sketches that it really, really doesn't have to be perfect. It's really okay for it to be close because you're going to know what this is kind of no matter what. I have this is a little out of proportion though. Okay, so we've got like this, comes down, this is just small. There we go, I like that better. Okay, now the horizon line in this is just below where this point is. This is kind of where the ocean meets the sky, but if you see in the picture, it's really fuzzy because it's really overcast. So I'm gonna make that line really light. Okay, I think I'm gonna be happy with this. It is not perfect, but it is good enough. So let's go ahead and lighten up the lines. So lighten up the lines of your sketch so that we can start laying some color in. We are going to keep this one super loose. We're going to avoid painting in the green areas and lay those down later. So we're going to start with all of the grays, I think, and then just start building up where those very grassy greens fall in. Now, one of the things I want you to notice right now, we're going to eliminate a lot of the, there's a lot of, I don't want to say noise, but there's a lot of detail in the way that the water swirls around, and we don't want to get caught up in trying to produce that detail exactly right. So I'm going to kind of make a very general, I want to capture how big some of these waves are. There's a huge wave that's coming like right here, and you can see it. You can see the darkness of it here, and it's lighter on that side, and it kind of stretches this way and then this way, and you can just see this like this big kind of dark shadows, and the shadows kind of stretch this way, and then here and here, right? And the white is kind of on the other side of that, and then the same thing is true here. We've got this like, this is dark and this is light, and then we've got all of this, and this, where this wave starts, it kind of curves up like this, and then that's where our white kind of comes swirling in, and it goes swirling in here kind of close, and then it kind of comes back and it's swirling here, and it pushes out this way to where the bottom of this wave is, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so go ahead and, you know, I'm gonna leave my paper right here so you can see. So we made kind of a little triangle-y, pyramid-y shape here, where that wave, you really see it, and you've got all this kind of shadow that's coming here, right? And then that wave is kind of stringing across here, and there's more shadow here, and you've got a little bit of foam that's coming, but then we've got this big white foamy area here, and it there's some spots that kind of swirl in. And so, and then from here, it's really white all around this space. Like you can see, kind of stretches in this way, and it stays pretty white all the way around here. Kind of comes back this way, and then it's white around this rocky thing. Oops, I'm not even looking at my paper, I was looking at my reference photo. Which sometimes I do that intentionally. Okay, so like from this rocky thing, we've got like this, I'm kind of tracing around the foam right now, right? And it comes in, and then it kind of swirls out this way, and it swirls in this way. You can see these little like swirl marks. So we want to capture some of those because it shows all of like the movement and the roughness of the water, but we're not going to try to capture all of them because that would be impossible. Well, not impossible, but that's not our goal. Our goal is not to paint this exactly as we see it, and then there's like some dark streaking here and some foam. Okay, so now I've got kind of a layout for where I want to leave it light. And then back here, even though this looks like it's small because it's off in the distance, of course it's not. You know it's not. It's just that it's in the distance, but what you can see is that the ocean is like raging around it. Actually, it's almost whiter here than it is up where we're working, like closer to where we are. And you can almost see some waves and some caps back in this space. It's really white. Okay. And so I wanna lay those out because I wanna make sure I don't paint over them. I don't want to use like a masking fluid or something like that because I want them to be soft, and we're going to kind of blend some soft edges into where this ocean is. Now the other thing I want to make note of is that there's not really any blue here. What we're seeing a lot of, maybe there's a little bit of blue in the shadows over here, but we're seeing a lot of grays. There's more grays than anything else. So we're going to focus on the grays, And we can do that by making blue. There's also a lot of green, and the green I think I'm going to use for this is the Green Genuine Appetite or Green Appetite Genuine, I can never get that right, by Daniel Smith, because I think that'll be a really good green to use. Okay, and so if you want to use a pre-mixed gray, such as your Payne's gray, you can do that, or you can mix your own gray. I think a lot of times I mix my own gray, but I think in this case, I'm going to go ahead and take that easier route and mix up some, or make a kind of a diluted mixture here on my palette of my Payne's gray. I'm going to add quite a bit of water, because we can build this color up later. What I am going to do is add a bit of my French ultramarine off to this side so that I can pull from it. If I want to add a little blue into like where those clouds are, you can see a little blue kind of undercast. I could actually, if I look really closely, almost see a little pink, but I think we're going to leave that off because that might make things complicated. And then we have some like turquoisey color that is around the foam area, but a tiny amount. So I'm going to pull just a little bit of my phthalo green blue shade. If you have like a Viridian, that'll work really well. So you can see I've got a lot of like color in my palette already. I'm not going to worry about cleaning that off, because if this muddies up a little, that's going to be good. I'm going to leave that stronger than I really plan on using it, but that's okay. And then the other thing is I'm going to use my Green Appetite Genuine, and I like this color because it's got this very natural, it's got a lot of yellow undertones, kind of olivey, and I might throw in a bit of my Azo Yellow Medium as well. Okay, so I've kind of developed what colors I'm going to be pulling from. As you can see, my palette's kind of a mess right now. When I do this kind of painting, I like that. I'm going to let's lighten these up just a touch more. And what we're going to start with is the sky. And so we're going to do our lightest. I'm going to get a lot of water in my brush. I'm using my size 14. And I'm going to just come here. Oh, okay, wait, I've got too much green in there. It's because I was mixing, didn't clean off my brush appropriately. Hang on. I do not want green in the sky. Okay, when you have something like that, I think I have some green mixing in here. When that happens, you see how like very quickly I was able to pop it up, so no harm, no foul. Okay, hopefully this is better. Yes, okay, so now what we're gonna do is just bring this down. I'm gonna bring it around the cliffs, but not, like I'm gonna come close to it, but I'm not gonna paint over it. And I'm gonna come here, I'm going to paint right down through the water, through the horizon line, but I'm gonna paint around where our, I'm tipping in a bit darker color right now. So if you notice in the photo, this is really soft. The water is darker where it hits the horizon, but it sort of, because it's misty, it's floaty in. That's not really a word, but it's not a distinct horizon is what I'm trying to say. Okay, now I have some green, this like phthalo green blue shade is sort of mixing into my grays, and that's perfect. And where you see a little more green is where it's coming closer to the shore. It's not a lot of green, but it's a little bit. So I'm going to kind of bring it in this way, right? And I'm kind of dipping around right here, and I'm going to bring this color back into my gray, more gray now. I just wanted to get that in. That's a little darker than I wanted, but that's okay. Okay, and I'm just coming in close to kind of where we had those lines before. If I get too dark, I can always take my paper towel and pull some up. We can go back in and darken it later. And because this is like this foamy stuff, right, we're gonna kind of skip. Do you see how like I'm dancing my brush around? And so that I have some of this white paper left, and I'm going pretty light. And I've got, like, I'm trying to leave some of where that foam is mixing in with the ocean. Okay, now I'm going to come back in here, grab a little bit more of that blue-green color, and I'm going to mix it in with that gray. And I'm just going to come in and tip, like if you remember we had this wave and it's right here. I'm just going to tip like this to develop a bit of a contrast. Do you see how, and it kind of floods in, which I love. So I'm kind of defining the fact that this wave is a little darker right here. And I'm going to just bring this in a few places. And now what we want to do is I'm going to move to a smaller brush. I'm going to go to my size 5 pointed round. So I have a nice pointed tip there. And I'm going to come in and grab this same like bluey gray. And I'm just going to pull some of it in here. I'm tipping in. And now I'm going to get just water on my brush. And I'm going to, if you notice, it kind of streaks towards the cliffs. See how the water streaks towards the cliffs? And it does here too. Actually, I'm getting kind of dry over here, so I might want to come in and re-wet that and make sure that we're like bringing in some of this stuff, right? Okay. So I'm just kind of pulling in those lighter colors, dancing around. Thinking of that surf that's kind of raging. And it gets, like you see these little shadows. You see how there's barely any paint on my brush. Okay, I know that went really fast, but this is one of those things that you kind of have to work fast, and so it's a little hard to talk through it and maintain what I need to on my painting. All right, we are going to be done, except I'm going to, see I have a little bit of my blue flowing in here. I'm going to let this be a little darker. Now things are drying a bit more. And so I'm going to come back in and redefine this like darker space because I really want you to see that there's this wave here. And then so I'm going to think about, is there anywhere else that I need to do that? And there is kind of a wave that's coming right here. I don't want it quite that dark though. Okay, let's pull some up. And I can see like it's kind of coming, if you look in the reference photo, it kind of arcs from here, right? Like this, and then it kind of comes like this, and it's kind of arcing this way, so that we've just got these bigger wave kind of patterns that are coming there. Okay, I'm going to lighten that up a little bit with my paper towel so that I have just an impression. And the ocean is definitely darker than we have it painted here, so I think we're going to go back in. I'm going to be careful. I don't want to go too dark because it's really easy to go too dark. So now that I've got everything pretty well established, this has kind of faded, and I want to kind of add a little more water in there. Okay. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to go back over this a little bit where this horizon was. And I'm just going to work in my paint. I'm just kind of dancing around. Just darkening this up so that you can see this is kind of a dark, moody ocean. And I'm looking at, like, we've got some like this is that line that I was doing before, right? And I'm just going to kind of come around. I'm wiggling my brush and I'm looking at my reference photo to pull in where I need it to be nice and dark. This looks nice and rough. It is not an exact replica by any means of what we're painting. I'm going to get a little bit more blue in here. And there's like a couple of like darker streaks right here. So we're gonna tip those in. And they kind of come this way because imagine the waves are like pulling in this way, and that's why we've got this guy here, and they're kind of arcing in like this. And we've got another one here. All right. I'm gonna leave that alone. I think if I keep messing with it, I'm not going to be happy with it. Now you see I have a hard line here, and I don't want it to be quite that hard, so I'm just going to go back up here, and I'm just going to soften this all up with a bit of water. I'm going to soften it up so that you can see, like, okay, this is where the ocean starts and stops, but it's really fuzzy because we've got this kind of grayed out fuzzy sky. Okay, now we do have some clouds and they get a little darker, so I'm going to go to my same mix, but I think I'm going to move it a little to the blue side. So remember I had a little bit of French ultramarine tucked in with this Payne's gray. I'm gonna add just a little bit more. This is just the softest bit of color, and I can see that the clouds are, they come along on a horizontal line here, and I want to keep them really soft. And so I'm just going to take my paintbrush, and I'm kind of looking at the reference photo, and I can see like we come in like this, and it comes up and like this, and it dips down. And right now it's very dry brushy. What I'm going to do next is add some water to flood that out, soften up some edges, and just take it to the top of the page. And it's not going to be 100% even. We don't want it to be because it's clouds. And now we're just going to, again, some more clear water, and I'm just going to soften up some of this. I'm going to leave some of it harder and some of it softer. And if you want to, you can even kind of come in with your paper towel in a few spots and pull some paint off. Now we've got this like illusion of these clouds that are kind of gathering. I'm going to smooth that edge a little. Gathering up over here, up over the cliffs. And we've got this like moody ocean, and this is all a bit lighter than our reference photo. This is dark. I want to redarken that up. So what happens is as stuff dries, sometimes you're looking at things and you're going, okay, this needs to be a little darker. I need to add some dimension here. And so you're going back in and you're adding that depth of color a bit here and there, but you're doing it slowly. I'm just like pouncing in, just like barely. And all of this layered texture just really gives it a lot of motion. And we're not, I keep saying this because I think it's an important reminder, we're not painting a replica. We are attempting to paint an impression of a landscape, right? And so it doesn't have to be exact. We just want to make sure that what we're getting across is that we have this rough, wavy, powerful ocean on this time where the winds are howling, and we have this clouds, they're overcast, and it's very moody. The whole picture is very moody. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the cliffs. But if we work on the cliffs right now, we've got a lot of wet paint, and so our very dark cliffs are just going to bleed into everything else, and we really don't want that to happen. So we want to make sure that we let this dry 100%, because our cliffs have a hard, definite edge because they are these big, hard, imposing, rocky cliffs. So we need to make sure that we don't let that bleed into any other parts of our painting. So I'm going to go ahead and put our video on pause, and then we'll come back when this is 100% dry. So I'll see you in like 20 or 30 minutes. Of course, you can use your little dryer if you want to, and then keep going, or you can just let it dry, go make a cup of tea, something like that. All right, I'll see you in a little bit. Alright, we've given our painting some time to dry. We're going to come back in and work on these cliffs. This is going to probably be the hardest part of this painting because it's going to be tricky to make these cliffs look imposing, and we want them to be really dark, but they've got these kind of lines and there's texture, and so we're going to do some funky brush marks in order to create that. We're going to do some kind of dry brushing methods, I think, but the first thing we're going to do is just give us a base. I think that's the easiest way to approach that, and what I'm going to do is they've got the ones to the back have a bluish cast, so we're going to take our French ultramarine in a very watered down format here, and I'm going to let some of that Payne's gray mix in, and we're just going to swash over, not where there's any green, but we're going to work on where there's no green. So you're going to have to paint around, like there's a bit of green that kind of comes back here, so we're going to paint around where that green is, right? And so for these back two, we're going to, I'm going to use a little more water and we're just going to fill these in. That's going to give us, because these cliffs aren't, there isn't white, it's not all the way pure white to the paper. That's kind of reserved for where this foam stuff is. The cliffs, if you look at them, they're pretty dark, right? And so even their lightest highlights have color or tone to them. And now for these front ones, this one has both blue and green. We're going to get warmer as we, of course, green has yellow, so green is going to have a warmer appearance than blue. So as we move closer to our foreground, we're going to get more and more green. So I'm taking some of my green Apatite Genuine here and I'm mixing it into my blue and Payne's Gray mixture there. So I've got this kind of grayed out green blue color, and that's what I'm going to use for this one, because of course this one's a little closer, and I'm going to avoid where that where it's going to be actually green. And this has got a pretty, like this one the green kind of dips down, but this one it doesn't. This one is a little more straight across. And I'm not going to forget to get my little like stair-steppy thing there, right? It's not called a stair-steppy thing, but that works for me. I think you know what I mean, right? All right, and now for this front one, because this is closer, we're getting closer and closer. This is warmer. It's not super warm, but it's definitely warmer. So I'm going to use just this green color, but I'm going to make it nice and diluted. I'm still going to try to avoid where that bright green is here and just pull. This is going to be like the undertone for that cliff, right? And you see how we're doing, like even without any of the gray color, do you see how we recede with the blues and that warm color comes forward? And now for this is all grass. There's not actually any cliff. There's a little bit of dirt mark here, but we're going to ignore that because that's just going to be confusing to the viewer. And we get to do that. We get to eliminate some things. See how I have this yellowy? My paints are really dirty right now. I'm going to pull in some of my, this is Azo Yellow Medium, and I'm going to pull it into this where I had some greens mixed before, so it's going to make kind of like a warm yellowy green, and I'm going to use that. I want a little bit of green underneath, and I might grab just a touch of my green Apatite Genuine and mix in there so that my colors are very unified, and then that's what I'm going to use on top of this. I'm going to leave a little separation there because I don't want them to bleed together. And there we go. And for this one, I've got a few highlights. I've done a little more bride rushy techniques because this is the grass. And so we're going to do the same thing with green over the top of that. But now we've established our sort of washes underneath. And we're going to end up doing a green and then the greens at the end on the tops of these cliffs, because I just think that's going to be a bit easier way to work. All right, we're going to let this dry because we want it to be dry before we dry brush. We're going to kind of, in the same way that we are going to use our brush here to create a bit of texture, we're going to do that here. And we're going to do it in a very kind of stripy manner because you can see the layers of these cliffs when you look at them. So they are kind of striped. Okay, so let's let this dry. After it dries, we'll come back. Oh, I almost forgot. Hang on. We've got our little rocky thing standing right here. We're going to use a nice mostly gray for him. So let's just like pull that in. There. Okay. All right. That's almost the color of the ocean. That's good. We're going to that's going to get really dark. So we'll do that when working the darker colors into these cliffs. Okay, I'm going to put us on pause. We're going to let this dry, and then we'll come back and paint in those big, jagged, rocky cliffs. So it's going to be very dramatic. All right. We're going to start painting these cliffs, and so we're going to need some really dark Payne's Gray. And I'm going to want we're going to use our green Apatite Genuine, which is this nice olivey gray. So if you have something that's a good olivey gray like that. And we're also going to want to mix in a nice bunch of our French ultramarine, so that we have these really nice deep colors to pull from. The other thing is there is some of these areas that are a little more like golden or warm, and so I'm going to pull in a tiny bit of, we haven't used this anywhere else in the painting, but that's okay. I'm going to pull in down here just a bit of burnt sienna. We could also use a little bit of, like if we wanted to, No, I'm not going to do that actually. We'll pull in burnt sienna. Okay, and we still have this little bit of yellow that we can use as well. I don't want to bring too many new colors in because then all of a sudden, see, oh, that makes a nice color. Okay, if we bring too many colors in, then it starts to get really disjointed looking. We want to kind of keep this as a small painting. We want to keep it a limited palette. Okay, so we need to really study where the value is on these cliffs. And so when looking at the photo, this is actually a little bit lighter and grayed out. I'm going to handle that at the end. This has a lot of darkness here. We're looking at like, where is the darkest part? There is a bit of grass right here, and so we might add that in, but it's hard to see. It sort of fades into the black, so we'll probably we'll let those merge together. And then we've got these kind of stripy layers of this cliff that are here that are a little lighter, and this is a little lighter. So like up in here is a little lighter, but this gets really dark. Same thing here. The bottom of this cliff is darker. It gets a little lighter here, a little more grayed out. There's a little bit of green in here, and it just gets kind of grayed out. And then this is strong and dark again. And then this is actually really light. And then it gets strong and dark here, and it comes back towards our grass that's here, kind of back like this. And then this is kind of a darkish but more brown, whereas this is a little bit more blue. So anyway, that's what we're looking at as we're thinking about pushing our color into here. And then this is really, really dark. It's as dark as down here. So that's how we're going to focus our colors. And I always feel like we can go darker much easier than we can go lighter. So what we're going to start with, this is like kind of like it's almost, because there's fog, it's got just a really blue undercast. So I'm going to take my blue and my Payne's gray, and I'm going to mix them together, and I'm going to just start building in underneath of here, and it kind of curls back a little, and it curls up into here. So I'm going to do that, and as I'm you can see I'm kind of jerking my paintbrush a bit, and so I'm not letting it be. We're going over this dry. My paintbrush doesn't have a lot of water because I want to keep it relatively dry by letting the paper, the texture of the paper come through with the brush strokes. We're going to create this like cliff-like texture, right? And so we're gonna just kind of pull in here, and I'm doing this and if you'll notice, the stripes are wider in some parts and not as wide in others, right? So we want to replicate that. I'm not touching the brush to the paper very hard. I'm letting the paintbrush dance over the paper. And so now we're going to make a nice stripe right here. Oops, I need a little darkness to that. And you'll notice right away, if you have too much water in your brush, it wants to like flood the paper rather than grab at it. All of a sudden you can't see the tooth of the paper anymore. I'm going to just kind of bring that in there. We're going to make a wider stripe, and then this is going to be, there we go. Okay, now this is where we've got a little bit of that green that kind of blends in, but it's really dark. So I'm going to take some of my Payne's gray into this, our genuine green apatite. And it's got some blue to it. It's like a very kind of deep green color. So I'm going to add a little bit of our blue too. Okay, ooh, there, that's perfect. There we go. And we're just going to let that fall in here. And do you see how it's barely green? That's what we want. Okay, it's going to be really subtle, but it is subtle. It's subtle in the picture as well. So now I'm going to go back to that blue-gray. I have too much water on my brush. I can tell just by the way the paint is swirling around here on the palette. I want to make sure that my brush is dry enough, right? And I'm picking up a bit more of that Payne's gray to darken it, because now we're moving into a spot in the photo where, the reference photo, where it is just getting darker. And we have less, like, you're seeing less of the sort of stripes that we had talked about before, and more, more depth of color. I'm going to add a little bit of warmth to that, just because I feel like there is, maybe not. Okay. And I'm just going to kind of come down like this. And I'm going to let my brush skip over. And if I need, see, okay, so this is where you know, like you're in between, and you can't really see, like once you get to this darker part, you don't even really see. There's a little bit of striping happening here, and then after that there's not. So now what I'm gonna do is add some water to my brush to let that paint flow in better, but I'm gonna keep it super, super dark. So I've got a little bit more water in my brush, but my concentration of paint is actually darker. And now we're gonna come in and just make this like almost black, because that's what it is. All right, and I'm gonna just tip a little bit more of this dark in here because it's kind of dark along this space too. And you can see like this kind of dips, and so we're dipping it. All right, there we go. Okay, I love how that turned out. That looks really nice. And some of this is maybe a little too white, and it's maybe a little bit warmer in our actual painting, but we can go back in and add that. I do see that there's a darkness, like the, you know, it's jagged, and so we've got some different shadowing. And so see how this dips down here, like this grass is dipping down here, and so on the other side of that it's a little darker right here. So I'm just going to add that because I want to make sure I don't lose that. There we go. And that just is giving it a little bit more dimension. And if you're a little too dark, you can always come back in with your paper towel. I'm a little too dark. I'm going to just pull a little bit up with my paper towel. Okay, do you see how now you can see that there are these, like, it's multifaceted, right? It's not sheer and just flat. And we can see that by adding that bit of darkness. And I can see there's a bit more darkness right up here too. So I'm just going to add that. I'm just using the photo as a general reference. Okay, and we can go back in and add more where we need to. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone. And now we're going to work on this guy in the very same way. So this one is, I'm going to use a little bit more. We've got that green undertone. I'm using kind of the same big pile of paint, right? And I want to pull some water off of my brush. I'm using my little sponge, which is off camera there. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And it's much lighter up to this front edge. So I'm going to make sure that I'm leaving it much lighter here, and it kind of dips up this way. It's not perfectly level, right? Like the cliff kind of comes in and out and in and out. You kind of see that in the picture. And now we're going to go like this, and I'm just skipping my brush across. And as we get down here, it gets really dark. So now I'm going to add a little bit more water because we're just going to kind of paint this in a bit more solid. My brush has a bit more water. I'm going to just pull in some of those other colors so it's not just that Payne's gray. And we're going to come where this little, there we go, where that little jut is. And you can see, okay, so now here's the thing. This water on the other side of this is rough, and we kind of see that. So you see how I'm going to kind of jump my brush around a little? It's so that we get this really nice sense of water spraying up and over the cliffs. Okay, and now let's just kind of come up, and as I come up a little higher, I'm going to just, there's a little bit of green right here. Let's do that. Let's get that bit of green in there, that nice olivey green color. I'm going to mix it in with that black over here, and we're going to let it it just kind of tucks right back in here. Oops, and a little more green, right here. Okay, and it's going to bleed down a little, which is great. Just lots of good texture. Now I'm going to make sure I don't have too much water in my brush, and we're just going to add a bit more of this kind of like texture from the cliffs. And because what I've lost here is I don't have that striping, and I want to make sure I do. Okay, all right, we're going to leave that as it is. I think it's a little, there's almost like little vertical, and so what I'm doing is here, this cliff back here didn't have that as much. This one has this kind of vertical texture as well. So I'm just laying my wet brush, and it's a little darker right here. So I'm laying my brush and I'm letting the shapes from top to bottom connect. Okay, and we're gonna let this connect and be really dark. Okay, I think we're gonna call that one done. And let's work on this one. Okay, this is the warmest. So when we mix up this really nice dark version of our Payne's Gray, I'm going to make sure that we have some of our olivey green in here too, because that's just going to make it like a little bit warmer. Okay, my brush is too wet, so I'm going to dab it on my sponge, get it kind of nice and dry, and we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to just let the paper, now here's, well, we'll deal with that later actually. Okay, so this part, this is lighter than this. So it's kind of warmer in color, but this has, you see, because it's closer, we're seeing those stripes better. And I want to establish, they're more horizontal because they're farther away, but this is coming at us at an angle. And so you can see that in the cliffs, they are coming that way. So I'm going to start, like, we've got this part where it kind of jagged it out, like jags out right here, right? And then we've got another spot that jags out right here. So I'm going to start at this spot, and I'm going to just kind of touch, and I'm just going to develop the line that I can follow. And it comes this way, and that kind of comes this way a little, because like you can see the land is got a little angle, it notches back, and then it comes back again, and it comes to right about here on my hill down, right? And so I'm going to just, now that's what I'm going to work with as my line. I'm going to kind of here, and pull it back, and here. So angle this way, kind of horizontal, and kind of back, right? And I'm letting my brush be really textury. Now this gets really light, so I'm just going to kind of let it be light right there. And then it gets really dark right here. So I'm going to pull up a little bit more paint, and I'm going to let this just be really dark right here. Okay. Oh, that's so interesting looking, isn't it? And it really, I think, does a nice job of giving us dimension. Now, our brush, I'm going to kind of darken this part and let my brush pull it together. Not all of it, I'm not coloring it all in, but I'm letting that, I'm going to take my finger and blot up where I've made a mess there. There. Okay. Now let's do above this main line, and there is some green grass that's growing right along this kind of juts out right here. So there's some green right here, so we're going to pull in, and I'm going to add a little bit of my Payne's Gray into that so that it blends, but we've got this subtle effect, and it kind of comes along, and it's right here too. Oops, it's a little dark there, and it kind of comes here too. Okay. But by the time it gets here, it's back to being rock. Now, I'm going to add, remember we added that burnt sienna here? This part of the rock right here is warmer. And so it's really warm up at the top. So let's add a little more burnt sienna. And so I'm going to paint in where the top of this is, and it goes from gray. So let's pull our burnt sienna here, and we're going to start here, right where the top, we're just kind of establishing where this is. And it's kind of, actually the very top line is like there's a layer of almost black, but then right below there is this more brown color. So let's let that blend in. We don't want it to be this bright burnt sienna because that would be wrong. So we're going to let that blend in with my bit of Payne's Gray to gray it out a bit. But we're just going to come along, and this is just like wider here, right? And we're going to come along, and then as we get closer here, we're going to let it get a little skinnier. We're going to let the texture of the paper show, but we're going to let some of the water run into each other. And like, remember how this line is jutting back? That's up here too. That's got kind of like a gray, it almost comes down like this. So we're going to let that happen. And you can see there's like these little, like, I'm going to call them triangles, but they kind of look like triangles because they're like jagged and jutting. So we're going to do that. And then here, we're gonna go back to our darker color. Okay. And we're gonna let it dance. And dance along here. There we go. I'm just using my reference photo to kind of see how that color blends in, that darker color. All right, I've rinsed my brush. There's some little bits of green on here, and I don't want to, I think it's going to be distracting if we do too much of that. I might pull just a little bit in, like it kind of climbs up here, and I think that's kind of interesting. So let's pull some of that green in this way. But there's some more over here, and I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do right here, and it kind of tucks down. All right, we're going to let that be there, and then we're going to take this kind of negative painting, but we're going to let it blend in a bit because it is all just kind of subtle and blend in. It's subtle and it blends in. Let's use some proper grammar there. Okay, so I'm mixing this Payne's Gray up with a bit of the green Apatite Genuine, and we're going to make this nice and dark right here. We're just gonna paint around where we just added that green, and we're gonna let this come this way. Okay, and it's more textury and less stripy right here, so we're just going to come in with our brush, wiggle it around, and just kind of create this rocky texture, but not in such a stripy way, right? All right. This has given us a nice, we've established some things here. We need to work it a little bit more. So this, I'm gonna use some darker Payne's Gray. I'm gonna mix it to the warmer side, which is where this burnt sienna leftovers kind of are. And we're just gonna come up here and kind of add darkness all the way down, because it is, right? This is where we have that, like, I don't want to call it a crevice, but it kind of is. And what it does, I'm going to pull a little bit of this out. What it does is it kind of splits this way and pushes up into here. So I'm actually just going to take my tip of my brush and push that paint up like this and like this to create that. And then it kind of dips, that darkness kind of dips back this way a little bit. And then same thing here. It's a little darker. I'm going to pick up a bit more Payne's Gray. It's a little darker. Kind of, you can see like it just got these funky like little like grooves almost, looks like. And then in here, I want it to be pretty dark but kind of warm. Because it is kind of warm right above where this grass is. You can see that you can just see more brown in the rock. So we're going to add more of that burnt sienna to my Payne's Gray. And we're going to, more than that, actually. Okay, there we go. We're just going to kind of like let it dance around here. But I don't want to cover up all of that texture. Okay, and then we've got kind of a dark, like right below where we had that kind of greenish color, this is kind of dark. So we're going to let that be a little darker here. And yeah, I'm just kind of darkening things up a little, but with that warmer color. All right, I think I'm going to leave it because I think if I keep painting, it's going to start to get confusing. And I don't want that to happen. We're going to, let's just do a little bit there. All right, we're going to stop messing. We can always go back in later. I know you have to warm this up a little, so we're going to do that with some of this brown. Let's do that next because we've already got the brown on our palette. So this lightness is lighter than what we're seeing in the picture. All right, so I'm gonna make that. I'm gonna dilute it a little bit, and we're just gonna kind of paint over the top of this in the same way that we were before. So the parts that are white are going to, we're glazing over. So the parts that are white are not going to be quite as white, and the parts that were darker are going to stay dark, right? Because we're adding just a very light layer of paint over the top. That's why it's called a glaze. Okay, and it kind of, this is a bit subtle because it's farther away, so it is a bit more subtle. So we're making it just a bit more subtle. Same thing here. Just gonna make this a bit more subtle. Okay. And this, I'm gonna add I wanna soften this up a little. It's a little too harsh, like the lines and the texture's a little harsher than I want. So we're just using a little bit of the same glaze, and it's gonna kind of unify things, because I feel like we're not very unified right now. Like this looks like a different Cliffs than that, and we don't want that. So we're just gonna I'm gonna go back over, do a little more glazing here. There we go. Okay. You can add a bit more of this burnt sienna in here. I'm just really playing with and adjusting the color right now. Just warming this up a bit. And we'll use a little bit of blue. Actually, we're going to use a little bit of blue to cool some of this off just a bit. Because we don't want to, I used warmer colors here, but I maybe went a little too warm. And so we don't want to like all of a sudden have this look like it's two different parts of the picture. So we're just going to bring that back in a little bit. There. Okay, I think we're more unified. Now we need to paint this back here. So we're going to just take this. We're just going to use this nice medium kind of blue, gray, green color from all over here. And this is just really solid in color. It's not, you can't see any like cliff kind of things. I might need to darken it up just a touch, but not a lot. Yeah, and actually you can't even see the green. It's too far away to see what the green is. There. All right, there. And then this is very dark, so I'm going to get a nice deep kind of intensely pigmented version, and kind of my, I'm mixing all these colors around, right? Like I'm just looking for not a straight Payne's gray. I'm looking to pick up some of the other colors in the piece, and we're going to bring that over to get a little bit of our blue here. And we're going to go ahead and make this nice and dark. All right, there we go. Okay, we're just going to darken that up. And this right here is every bit as dark as these pieces. So I want to kind of bring that up. And then this is also very dark. So we want to bring that up, and we're going to bring this like this. There we go. Okay, I'm pretty happy about that. I think that looks pretty good. And so we're going to let this dry and then come back in and paint the last of our grass, and our Cliffs of Moher are going to be done. All right. And if you need to do any little bit of color adjusting, if you need to do a little more glazing here to make things mesh, we can do that too. So we can address that after it dries. But we want this to be all the way dry, so I will see you back in like 30 minutes to make sure that it's all the way dry before we move on to the next stage. Okay, so your paper should be all the way dry now, and we are going to go in and add these grassy green tops. And so we're going to use the same green that we've been using all along. I'm going to use my size 4 brush, and I'm going to pull out that Green Apatite Genuine. I'm going to make a nice pile right here, but I want to warm it up in some places, or lighten it up, I guess, with some of my Azo Yellow Medium right here. Okay, now we have this like variation of greens to choose from, and we can add a little bit of our French Ultramarine to the back side here. So now we have kind of like an array of greens to pull from. All right, let's come in to the farthest away, which is going to be the most kind of bluish, grayed out, because when things are further in the distance, they're kind of grayed out. And we're just going to pop up our green here, and it kind of comes over the cliff. And it's a little more yellow right here. So I'm gonna just do a little more yellow. And it's a little lighter up over here. Okay, and it kind of blends in. You can't really tell if it's yellow or gray right here. Like it's kind of like grass, but it's also gray, so it's hard to tell. It just kind of blends in, so we're gonna let that blend in there. I'm just gonna dip a little, I just dotted a little bit of my Payne's Gray into it. Now I'm gonna pull to the lighter side of the green with a little bit more yellow value to it. Or hue, I should say. Hue is the right word. And I'm just gonna kind of paint over the top of this. I'm just dabbing my brush in that way, right? Now I'm bringing this back farther than it is in the picture because I want these things to join together a bit more. Okay, so same thing. Now we're gonna work kind of in this middle value between the blue and the yellow. And we're just gonna pull this in like this. And it like bumps up. We've got a little more green showing here than what is in the actual reference photo. So it's almost like we're looking down a bit more, but that's okay. So I'm going to touch just a teeny bit over here. Barely. We can't really see any in the picture, but that I think is good. Now this is more grayed out, so I'm going to pull a little gray into the bluer side, but it's, there we go. All right, a little more blue. So we've got a more blue-green gray over here. And that's what we're going to use for this. And it kind of climbs up into that wall. And you see how I'm kind of scrubbing it into the paper? Now towards this front, it's a little more yellow. It's a little warmer. So I'm going to pull, whoops, pull a little, I need to add a little more Azo Yellow here to this. Azo Yellow Medium. That's a Rembrandt color, and I really love it. I don't know that they make or sell it anymore, so I think I'm going to be in trouble when it's gone. All right. Now let's pull in a bit more of my Green Apatite Genuine, and we're just going to work that in here, right over the top, right? And this is dark back here, and it's like a blue-gray. And so I'm just gonna dip in. Oops, let's get some of that Payne's Gray as well. It's a little too blue because it kind of blends. It's kind of like you can't really tell where the grass starts and the cliff ends right here. So we're gonna just kind of let the two bleed together so that we can't tell. Oh, I really like that. Okay, super happy with how that turned out. And the same thing down here. It's just really hard to tell what's what. So we're just gonna let that blend in. This is the beauty of watercolor. This is where that magic comes together, and it's just really exciting because of the way that this is blending, and we're getting some like little bits of blooms and texture here. I'm really, really happy with that. Okay, so then the next thing is this. And so now this grass is close up. We're not gonna paint individual blades of grass because I don't think that that ever, like this is a watercolor and we're giving an impression of something. So we don't need to do that. But, well, actually, before we go there, I'm going to add a little bit of gray. I'm going to just dip this in here because this is a little dark right here. So I'm just adding a little bit of darkness there. So it kind of does that there. And I'm going to add a little bit of darkness here. All right, there we go. I'm just fixing that a bit. Okay, so for this area, I'm going to move to my size 5 round. And I'm going to, rinse it off, but make it so that there's not too much water, and I'm going to pick up this greeny, yellowy green color right here, and we're just going to dry brush this on. Kind of over the whole thing. I've got to get a little more. If it's not dry brushing at all, then it means you need a little more paint, but you want to make sure you have that texture. So if I have too much water, I wouldn't be getting this great texture. And you see how that, and I'm going in this angle because that's the angle of this little ledge, and then it kind of dips back. So I'm gonna kind of pull my paint, my dry brushing that way. I'm gonna let it fill in a little bit more here. There we go. Same thing here. Okay, and now right here, it gets kind of dark and brown. I'm gonna add just a little bit and add a little bit of this Payne's Gray. And remember, I have my burnt sienna here, so it's a little warmer. I'm going to just pull that here, and I'm just going to kind of come in here, and it kind of sticks up there. And so when we do this, and I'm just adding some little bit of detailed brush strokes just in a few spots. Do you see how this gives it like this tufts of grass kind of look? And then there's like a couple of spots here, like right here, it's a little darker. And so I'm going to just give a little highlight. I'm kind of using where my dry brushing separated. And then I might bring a little dry brushing back like that. There we go. That's all I'm going to do. Oh, I'm so happy with that. And so do you see how we're using really simple little brush marks in order to create that? Now this ended up more black than I wanted. It's standing out in a way that I don't like. So I'm going to take I'm going to take a tiny brush. I have a tiny brush here. I think it's probably like a size 1. It's a short round, so it's like a miniature brush. And I'm just going to paint some water on this, just to soften it up a bit. I'm going to bring it out a little bit because it needs to come out a little bit. And if yours is fine, then you don't need to do this. But mine just has this, I don't love the way it looks. And now I can, because it's re-wet, I'm going to take this dry paper towel and I'm just going to pull up on it. Okay, there. Much happier with that. And the other thing that I think isn't looking quite right is back here. So I'm going to take my size 4 and I'm going to mix together some French ultramarine in with my, I'm going to let a little green flood into there, and my Payne's Gray, which I'm not able, well, I don't know why it's not coming up. There we go. I think I'm being really gentle with it. Okay. I'm just going to come back here and I'm just going to darken this up a little bit because I think it sticks out in a way that I think I don't like, right? And I'm going to pull a little bit of that out. There. We're going to let this be highlighted still, right, so that we can see the difference. Okay, I'm going to pull a little out. All right, there we go. It just needed to be joined together a bit because it felt like feels like it's just out here floating. Okay, and then I think what I'm going to look at is these cliffs, right? I think we're going to go through and we're just going to add a nice big deep mixture, like really dark value here of our Payne's Gray, and then I'm going to pull in our burnt sienna. There we go. So it's like a warm, like gray, brown, but mostly gray, right? That's really pretty. Okay. And now I'm just going to go in and I'm going to darken a few spots. I think like right here, this leading edge needs to be darkened because, right? And I'm just using the photo as in this. Remember, this kind of was darker here. There we go. Just think it needs to be a little darker. These are so big and imposing. And this is going to kind of unify things too. So I'm doing the same thing here. And we're going to make it really dark down in this water area. Okay, and same color is going to come up in here because this is really dark. We're going to a little bit up in here too. Oops, I need a little more water on my brush because it's starting to not make any marks, because this is definitely darker than this when we look in the reference photo. I've got this weird highlight. It doesn't, we're going to kind of get rid of that a little. And then it's really dark right here. So we're just kind of darkening up. And by using the same color on all of the cliffs, we're unifying. Okay, and now I'm going to bring this down this way a little, just a little. All right, I think we're going to call this done. This got a little darker than I wanted it to, so I'm just going to pull some up. Okay, the last thing is that there is the teeniest, tiniest little castle over here. So using, and it's just in a, it's not all the way black. So I'm going to use a little bit of this kind of grayed out browny gray color, which is what it is in this picture. And it's just sitting on the edge here, and I'm just going to draw a little like, there we go, little rectangle. And then I'm going to come out with a little more. There's a little more here and a little there. All right. Actually, it's a little blobby. If it's a little blobby, go ahead and dot it off and fix it. There. Okay. That's off in the distance. And I think this one is done. Thanks so much for watching. This is a tutorial for July 25th for World Watercolor Month, and the prompt was Howl. I think I can just imagine the winds howling over here. I hope you enjoyed this. This was a little more complex in terms of the tutorials that we've done, but thanks for watching and coming along with me on this World Watercolor Month journey. I'm so happy to have you here. I will be doing another tutorial tomorrow for our next prompt. We're almost done. And then when this series is done, I have some ideas for our next series. So make sure that you're subscribed, and we can move and grow together as watercolor artists.